brief history of St. Thomas that that I will share with you. November 13th, 1874, the village of Trufant was planted. That's 149 years ago, which means next year we will have our 150th anniversary of the planting of Trufant. It was 18 years later before the first Danish Lutheran church was built on the west side of the village with a tall spiral steeple that is said to have reached straight up to heaven. The Lutheran religion was brought by the early Danish people who settled in this area of tall white pines and beautiful sugar maples of Maple Valley Township. Who came for the land? The people came for the land and the timber that was cheap. There were good wages. The people were earnest. There was good government. The girls were nice, and many of the men thought they were going to marry them, and many of them did. The people in Denmark received this word, and they loaded their trunks on their wagons. They headed for the railroad stations, to the steamboats, or anything to get them to the steamships that were headed for the USA. They lived on salt pork and biscuits for 8 weeks. Many boarded trains that were headed for Kalamazoo. It was the closest station to Greenville. And then many continued on by stagecoach. They built small homes averaging 12 by 20. They worked in the sawmills for $1 a day. This is 6 times what they would make in Denmark. Land was selling for $2 an acre. They wrote letters back saying that they had good health, they lived by the water, they had lots of work in the hay and harvest, and they urged their friends and relatives to come and bring as many with them as they could. Luther was the established church of Denmark, but the language barrier became a real problem in America as there were so very few ministers that could speak Danish here. Churches were held in homes and schools. In 1874, Reverend Ole Amble, a Norwegian pastor, came to Macomb County. He was here for 54 years, and he is said to have baptized and married about 7,000 people. Many people desired a minister from the Danish Lutheran Church that was organized in 1874. The first child to be baptized in Trufant was done in November of 1875, and the first communion was December of 1875. This began the first work to lead to the organization of St. Thomas Lutheran Church in 1881. Reverend Peterson and Ole Amble were among the few who owned a horse. Most drove oxen as they could not afford a horse. Pastor Peterson and Pastor Amble took turns serving the several churches in the Trufant community. Pastors have come and gone. Some left to teach, some to do mission work, some retired, some left to go to other churches, some served as military chaplains. In 1891, land was donated for a church by William Pierce. The first Danish church in Trufant was dedicated in 1893, and it cost $1,200. When it was finished, the congregation had a debt of $400. In 1894, the Danish Lutheran Church split in two because of a disagreement about a constitution. In 1896, Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Edmore was formed, and in 1898, St. Paul in Greenville. There was much growth in the churches at this time, and the few pastors would serve more than one congregation. In 1898, a parsonage was purchased for Pastor So on the corner of 1st and D Street. In 1900, the church bell was purchased for $100. In 1902, the altar was built for a cost of $65, and that was for the pitcher. As the church grew, a need for room for the horse and buggies was needed, so a strip of land on the west and north side of the lot was donated by the Barling family. The shelter stood for many years. Many used the same stall every Sunday for their horses. Pastor So often used his bike for transportation. In 1903, Reverend Bogard became unhappy with the policies of the United Danish Lutheran Church, and he returned to the Danish Church, splitting the congregation, and 16 members left, also helping to form a new church in Trufant, known then as Bethany. St. Jorgen's congregation was united to St. Thomas, forming one congregation, and the lumber from St. Jorgen's Church, which was torn down, was used to build the two wings and a chancel on St. Thomas. It was also decided to raise St. Thomas and put a basement under the whole building. This greatly enlarged and improved St. Thomas. It was all dedicated on December 5th of 1909. 1914 to 19 were the war years. The pastor's salary was $700. Times were hard. A barn was built on the parsonage property so the pastor could have a cow. He also gave services at Huggard School on Sunday afternoons. In 1919, St. Thomas made a resolution to introduce English into the Sunday service. Lightning had struck the steeple in the church several times. And in 1923, it was partly destroyed, so the top was redesigned so it was not so high. In 1937, Carl Nyrad, who had served as custodian of the church for some 30 years, was honored. It is said that he had made over 800 trips to the church to do his duties. He loved music, and many times he would climb up the steep steps to the bell tower on the top and tap out hymns which pealed across the countryside on cold, frosty nights. He especially loved to tap out Christmas hymns. And on Christmas Eve, near midnight, in 1943, he was found in the bell tower where he had passed. In 1935 to 42, the grounds were landscaped and the evergreen trees were planted. The art glass windows were installed at a cost of $130 each. Many pastors supported the Bass Lake Bible Camp. And in 1947 to 50, God's Acre Plan was to rent land, raise crops to sell to support the camp. This was a project of Pastor Carlson. On March 18th of 1951, Reverend Nest baptized 23 children on Palm Sunday, and the 16 choir members gave a concert that night. From 1951 to 59, Pastor Levine served as pastor, and the new parsonage was built at an estimated cost of $9,000, of which the sale of the old parsonage for $4,500 would help finance this project. The debt was about $5,000 plus interest. When completed, it was estimated to be worth $18,000. It had 7 rooms plus a full basement. Sunday school pupils numbered about 104 at that time, and about 100 new members joined the church. In 1965 to 69, the walls were painted blue with white woodwork. The floor tiled white and black marble, and red carpet was installed. Ebe Hansen built 2 lectures. New walnut pews with kneelers were bought for $125 each. The altar was moved ahead. The cupboards were built in the back. A memorial fund was established. Additional land was bought from the Dowlings for $500 to be used when needed. A new garage was added to the parsonage, and a new roof put on the church. In 1970, an addition was added to the front of the church, widening it 9 feet, adding a basement under it, and an upper room over it that cost $33,500 at that time. Through the years, we continue to make improvements, and this is kind of a review of what has happened up to that time. During our 142 years, we have had 29 pastors. We have celebrated our 75th, our 100th, and our 125th anniversary. And in 8 short years, we will be ready to celebrate our 150th. So maybe in our next 8 years, we can start thinking about how we want to celebrate that. This is kind of my short little review of St. Thomas.